Body. It's an intimate set. Now it's being recorded. All right, so this meeting is just going to be loaded up on the website after the fact, so it's not live streaming. No one's on video or anything. We don't have that capability up here. And we'll see. We're going to play it by ear. I'll let the rest of the board know as well come October. We were sort of sidebarring with IT. If they don't have the live streaming available downstairs, then we may go off-site, but you'll have plenty of notice beforehand. It'll be in Nashville at least. There's no surprises on that front. So welcome. In absence of our chair, Rob Barrick isn't here today. Let me go ahead and call roll. James Collins. Here. Alvin Hefco.
I'm here.
Eddie Jett.
Here.
Jason Carter.
Here.
Dr. Ash.
Here.
And then, of course, Rob Barrick. All right, so we're just minus one member, but we do have quorum. You recognize Eddie Jett there. He is our new associate engineer member coming from East Tennessee. As you can see, they're geographically situated there, east, middle, and west. So leave it to the engineers to do that, right? Yeah, I was talking to Eddie beforehand. I was like, you know, the artistic side of the brain is supposed to be the right side of the thing. You notice how the architects sit on the right side, the engineers, the critical, sort of, technical folks are over there. Anyway, but nonetheless, I think we're ready to go. We've only got two things on the agenda today. We've got the application review, and then we have basically a discussion that may flow out of that. That probably will flow out of that because we haven't really drilled down on some of the pathways. All right, so you won't have any. That box right there, from what I understand, records everything. We've had one board go before us, accountancy went before us, and it can pick it up. So it won't be. We may just need to put one of those downstairs, don't we? It seems like we're fumbling around with the microphones, but no microphones here. It can pick it up. It can hear it.
They are active, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So yeah, you should be able to.
There's no red thing on it.
No. Got the green light right there.
See that.
Okay. So I think we can dive right into the application review. It'll be denoted on your iPads under engineer. So it'll still be enumerated just like we do when we do the full board meeting, but you'll have that preface of engineer 1 and 2. So the 1 would be the application itself. 2 would be the code, the statute, the 4 pathways, as for your reference, so we can dig into that if we need to. All right. We're looking at pathway 2 here with this applicant. The 4-year degree is ABET EAC equivalent. That 4-year degree is ABET EAC equivalent for Rule 120.01.10.1b.
Is that university part of the Washington Accord?
I don't believe so. No, because he sent it for evaluation. So no. So typically at pathway 2, we're looking at ABET EAC equivalents, and so that's where we had some of the discrepancy that required your review. And that's required under Rule 120.01.10.1 says your permitted discretion for Part C, which states, in reviewing applicants holding degrees from non-accredited engineering programs, whether obtained in the United States or otherwise, which are substantially equivalent to degrees from ABET accredited programs, the board may consider, that's why we're here on this application, the following factors. 1, evidence of having obtained the statutory minimum acceptable progressive professional experience of a grade and character, so those would be sort of your operating sort of parameters, of a grade and character which indicates to the board that the applicant may be competent. So we're looking at sort of minimum standards, not necessarily preferred, to practice engineering. Rule 120.1.10.2 states, progressive experience in the practice of engineering consists of engineering experience which is supervised by a registered professional engineer, falling within the categories described in subparagraphs A through D. I don't have those paragraphs before you, but they're in the rules there, and it's pretty extensive. So we don't have to necessarily, if we need more information or want to review after we come to some sort of philosophical position as a committee, then we could go back and look at that and just decide if that is in fact the case and what we want to do with them. So what we're trying to decide now is, with this applicant before us, does he meet those parameters? And you have his comments on the first page, his response when we told him that this was going to be brought before the committee for discussion, and then his application right behind that. And again, pathway number 2, the FE is waived because of his 12 years experience.
He didn't pass the PE.
Yeah. Correct.
He does have 5 excellent references. I think all of them were excellent except one, which was good. Uh,
The only concern I have with the references is that our rules say that only 3 of those can be from his current employer, and 4 of those references are from his current employer, and 1 is from an employment that happened 20 years ago. So that was one concern I had about his references.
And what we can do as well with him is form a response to him. You know, if there's items that you want in addition to that, so you can properly exercise your discretion, then we can do that as well.
And, another thing I have here, you know, he's supposed to have 40 years of rich experience on the PE.
Right.
And I can count the experience he has with Skidon. That's basically on the PE. But how about the rest? I don't know if the rest actually can count for 6 more years on the PE. It's not clear from the application. But in terms of substantially effort, in terms of this undergraduate degree, I think it can be considered that and passing the PE, that has to count for something, and then, you know, missing 2-3 hours of exercise, don't think it makes it count substantially.
Is this current supervisor of PE, you get that? No.
Yes, well, he would be, if his reference, he would have to, his experience would have to be under a registered, PE, but not the reference would not necessarily have to be.
Yeah, but it's got Jeremy Price, we don't think he's not a licensed engineer. Right. Yeah, that was concerning to me. I mean, I understand that there's a guy that's above him that is registered PE, and the chain there is, but direct supervision, it doesn't appear as though that's been under registered PE. And we don't know, I mean, for a while there, he was under a registered PE, and then we changed supervisors, but we don't know when that occurred. That's not identified in any of the references or anything as to when that occurred. So we really don't know for sure how much experience he has directly under a PE.
I think in the past, historically, and he's got 6 years' experience inside TDOT, and he's worked in, I think, under different individuals inside TDOT. I think one of the things that we've looked at is, and again, that's part of the getting to yes component of this, we've had a number of people that were in industry that have applied and didn't have a direct correlation. Their direct supervisor was not a PE because in industry, of course, they had the exemption. But there were peripheral services like some of the vendors that they work with, the contractors that they work with, or other suppliers that they work with did have PEs that they worked directly with on projects, and we granted them credit for that. So whether he's directly reporting to a PE or not, if somebody has a level of supervisory control, whether it's a level or 2 removed, typically in the past we've given them credit for that. So that covers the time when he was working for his, you know. That's 6 years. Yeah. Over 6 years. Yeah. Right. The time before that, we don't know if it's covered. Right. Yeah, but as long as he's got the 4 years, yeah, really that covers the requirement. Well, I'm sorry, you're right. Yeah, that's exactly right. You are right.
Well, yeah, and the other part about that is that I guess I was trying to find some clarification on is progressive experience. Because it looks like his entire career has been doing essentially the same thing, and I have trouble seeing progression in his experience over his entire career.
One option too that you have, and other boards do this with experience interviews, like real estate appraisers, they'll do an interview. Like when, you know, they'll have one of the board members call them and then pick those things apart and then bring back those notes with the recommendation for remediation or otherwise. That's one option. We had one board member that deferred to that, said, I'd be willing to approve, but I wanted a civil engineer to interview him. You know, so that that might be an option, is to have a civil engineer, and then bring that information back to the board, and then at that point, we'd be prepared to make a recommendation. Unless the engineer, board member at that point was comfortable, then they could just go ahead, they could be the second signature, and then it'd be out the door. There'd be nothing to bring back, you know? Unless they ran into some policy or process issues for which we would bring back to the committee, because then as a collective, we would have to hammer that out. So that's one path forward, if that's what, I'm just collecting some of the things that we are concerned, and then that person they do that interview can take that back to them and sort of unpack that.
Like early, he had building design experience, and then he's got a master's in structural, and then he switched directions to the transportation side, took that PE exam, and then that 6-year experience with TDOT, not sure if it has design in it, like he's managing projects, which I think could qualify. So it looks like there's a, as far as progressive, it looks like there's a little bit of direction.
I'm just making notes of this, because it looks like, from, not to assume, but it looks like maybe an interview might be in order for one of our board members. Barrick has already looked at it, and he asked that a civil engineer, so either Mr. Carter or Dr. Ash, if one of you would be willing to reach out to him. Okay. Well, then I'll send you guys his information, his contact information, and I'll let him know, obviously, that collectively that one of you will be reaching out to him. And then with some notation of some things that were a concern for us, and then you can either make a recommendation at that point if you're comfortable with it, or if you're not, and bring that back to us, and then we'll re-review. Does that work for everybody?
I guess, you know, still the biggest question overall to me is how do we get to the 12 years?
Okay.
Yeah.
And then for your interview, I'll send you the rules so you can have that in front of you. You know, that what defines that progressive experience. You can sort of use that as your grid.
Well, again, maybe I'm misreading this. It looks to me like he began work in 2005, like most young engineers, basically being assistant to another engineer, doing data reviews, writing reports, evaluating test results, things like that, all the way up to managing 20 projects for TDOT. That shows progression to me, but it also demonstrates that from 2005 to 2022, and I went to public school, but I think that's more than 12 years of service. I do agree that probably an interview would be helpful, but I can see that he's got 12 years of experience just by the information that he's provided. And it does appear to be progressive because his level of responsibility and supervision going to a level of a supervisory role over that period of time demonstrates progressive growth. But again, I do agree that an interview might be helpful. The other issues with the humanities, quite frankly, that's not an issue for me. I mean, he instead of taking the humanities, he had a focus on other engineering-related curriculum, which I think I would prefer. So I don't think there's no position. No. Yes.
Yeah. So it seems like the focus and the scope that narrowly be looking at will be that experience. Okay. Very well.
Well, I think the other thing that was brought up too is all of his references appear to be they are all positive, but under one employer. Well, I guess with the exception of, yeah, right. So what we may ask him to do too, Glenn, while we're asking him to interview with us, is if he can reach out to one of his previous employers and get another reference, that would be helpful.
The other thing that was a little bit concerning to me about the references is that most of them had very little comment in their forms. I don't know if that's normal or not.
It is.
But,
Most people just raffle through it.
yeah, and that just concerns me that, you know, and like one guy went to the trouble of writing, they had no comments. That concerns me a little bit. But, yeah, maybe normal. Yeah, I don't know. I know when I give a reference, I write a book, so, you know.
I was sidebarring with Stuart here because trying to get an idea of sort of what the scope is with the references, because in employment we can reach out to the references, and so you can do that as well. So as a part of that interview, you can, if you want to reach out to them, that reference and say, hey, got a candidate for.
The other thing to look at is somebody like, we're engineers, we're not overly wordy generally. And I'm looking at one right now that said, no, yes, the felony, no, obviously, but everything else was yes. But if you look at the way that he ranked them, it was above average on every category.
Yeah.
So may want to consider that all.
Right. Mm-hmm. Do we have any other comments as to this application? Very well. I think we have a marching orders in. I think we have a path forward with him, so we'll straighten that out and then get that one moving. Then, since we're talking about applications, it seemed prudent and time would allow, and I think it does, since we went through that one pretty quick. I don't have a big clock here. I wanted to discuss the pathways. We've had some discussion about that. Pathway 3 in particular. And one thing is we haven't qualified. We passed on qualifying the undergrad degree when we did our rules. We had that discussion at length. That's been recorded, and then we'll get there'll be another look at that when we do the rulemaking hearing. Come, whatever that meeting is scheduled for. Kind of waiting on it to go through the pipeline. I can't say for sure when that's coming. We've got several boards. When we went through legislative session, that were in rule review and the rest, some of those administrative projects took, of course, priority. As a result, rules, they're going to be second tier always to statute. That's how that works. So we're waiting on it to work stuff to the pipeline. I hope that'll come soon. But for application reviews, the practical side of that, is number 3. So I just want to read it first to get it in your brains, and then have that discussion. We don't have to take any action, but if we can just begin that discussion, that'd be helpful. Get there myself. All right. So there's the public chapter in front of you. Those are our 4 pathways: 1, 2, 3, 4 enumerated. You go to 3, and basically. It's a graduation from approved postgraduate engineer curriculum experience and examination. A graduate of a curriculum of 4 years leading to a baccalaureate degree approved by the board as being of satisfactory standing, accompanied with the completion of postgraduate coursework and engineering curriculum leading to a master's degree or higher in engineering approved by the board as of being of satisfactory standing. So, and of course, you recognize the rest of the criteria. So it's the master's degree. Well, we waived on the bachelor's degree, but we haven't really had the discussion about how do we qualify the master's degree. How would we do that? A lot of us know what an engineering degree looks like, but might probably need a little bit more structure to give us that sort of safety net. And so one thing that I would recommend as a possibility was I was looking at 2 and 4. 2 Two, that 4-year degree there for progressive experience, it's implied that that's ABET, EAC, accredited typically. That's, or it's equivalent. We just had that discussion about number 2. Number 4, the master's degree is articulated as being ABET, EAC equivalent. So
I think I'll go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, that's correct. I'm thinking about the ETAC.
Yeah, well, that's the undergrad degree for Path 4. But the ABET EAC is for the master's degree. That postgraduate work for Pathway 4 is ABET EAC. Pathway number 2 is ABET EAC for the undergrad. And so for sake of consistency, it would appear to sort of tie all that together that that graduate degree would be ABET or EAC, right? Problem is, though, when we looked at some of the a lot of the programs, there's no ABET EAC master's programs that, at least within the U.S., or not U.S., they're certainly in the U.S., but within Tennessee, that are ABET EAC equivalent. So how would we fix that? When I looked at pathway number 4, and here's the language, and this is what it says. It says, I can get there myself.
I actually drafted this, so.
Oh, good.
The requirement here was that they if they got a degree from a university, and I think there are 9 of them in the state of Tennessee that grant the ETAC or ETAC accredited. They have to get a master's degree from a university that has an EAC undergraduate.
And you nailed it. That's where exactly I was going. So that was the spoiler alert right there. That's how we would do it. It's just for all that same language. So I would recommend, and obviously we're not carving up the statute right now, but when you see the words when we're talking about master's degree or higher in engineering approved by the board as being of satisfactory standing, then just like we do with pathway number 2, your thought process would go to from an institution with an ABET EAC accredited undergraduate engineering program approved by the board as being of satisfactory standing. So you're using that same language from 4 and importing it into 3 for sake of consistency. You're saying that, look, we don't have any master's programs that are ABET EAC accredited in the state of Tennessee. So if they've got undergraduate programs that are ABET EAC, then they're using the same professors. That's a quality program. Oftentimes they haven't sought EAC accreditation because they haven't needed to. There wasn't a pathway for it till now. And that's a very expensive process. So that gives them a couple of 2-3 years to sort of catch up. If they want to seek that accreditation for their master's programs, they can. But until then, we at least have some sort of process where we can say, okay, for pathway number 3, is that master's grad? Do they have undergrad? Is that from a program that has ABET EAC undergraduate program? If they have that, then obviously they're using the same facilities, the same lab, the same professors.
What if they've gone to a university that say doesn't have an EAC accredited undergraduate program for engineering, but they studied molecular biology or nuclear physics?
Well, it would be that undergraduate program, engineering program that has undergraduate ABET EAC approved. So it's still engineering if it's in something non-engineering.
No, I think one of the reasons for this particular one is to allow somebody who had what we thought might be let's say a degree, an undergraduate degree in biology or chemistry. I'm not talking about, we've used this same term every time we talk about this, art history. Okay, you've got a degree in art history or music. Well, that's not really a pathway towards engineering. But if they had a strong degree in a science, for example, like biology or chemistry, and then got a master's degree in engineering from an ABET EAC accredited university, we considered that as an alternate pathway to licensure. There are some degrees from universities that are stellar universities that have great science degrees or computer-based degrees that may not be ABET EAC accredited. I think we need to evaluate that, or consider that. That sort of bends the purpose or the way this was, and Robert was the one that wrote this one, it bends the way from the intent for why this was structured the way that it was.
Yeah, and you're talking about qualifying the undergrad degree, which we did have that debate, and at the time, we passed on that. Today, we're just discussing qualifying the master's degree, not the undergrad degree.
So the master's degree has to be from an ABET accredited, EAC accredited. I thought that, was that language?
It's not in the layer, that was,
That's not what got passed.
yeah, no.
So if I understand what Drew's saying, it can be any four-year bachelor degree
Correct. That is-
plus a master's degree in engineering. Doesn't say here that it should be a bit.
Yeah, it would, and then we would borrow language from pathway 4, import that into pathway 3, in practice. Obviously, we're not
I agree
importing,
with that.
Yeah. And we're saying that since we don't have any master's degrees that are ABET EAC accredited, then if they have an undergraduate program that's ABET EAC or equivalent, then we can say that's an engineering program, that's a master's program. There's no doubt in our mind, And so, and the intent there is not to eliminate anyone's discretion. You would still have your discretion to make decisions if they didn't necessarily fit in that construct. We're just saying to expedite those applications that have that, we can go ahead and move them on. So if you see that as a reviewer and you say, they've got an undergraduate program that's ABET EAC, they're pathway 3, we're not looking at their undergrad degree yet, then if I can check their master's off right off the jump without having to bring it to the committee, because if it's ABET EAC accredited undergrad, then out the door if they make the other stuff.
Very.
And that provides consistency with 2, 3, and 4, all the way down the path. Okay, that sounds good. And there doesn't have to be a decision on that because you are the reviewing body, but just wanted to sort of, I know there's been some questions, and so there was some.
That's the one that one did not get approved, right? It was the one that was excluded from the.
It didn't make it in our statute. You have the public chapter for what passed in front of you, those 1, 2, 3, and 4. And in essence, what you will have, if that's what you're doing in practice, in essence, 3 and 4 become the same, with the only difference is that the ETAC undergrad degree remains protected, since that was specifically named, So that's the only difference between 3 and 4 at that point.
What do we need to do?
Nothing.
Okay.
That was just for discussion. I wanted you guys to have some comfort going forward because I know that we haven't had that discussion yet. So I just wanted you to have that discussion because you'll be reviewing those applications and talking about it. So you just needed sort of a consensus on that as that goes forward. But no action required because you always had the authority in your discretion as inculcated into the statute. And so there's, but for sake of clarity, since you're reviewing that going forward, I just knew we needed to take the platform at a time.
In case you're trying to prevent, we were going into about having a non-related bachelor's and going into a master's. But if you pick what we talked about, the master's program, I think most of those courses have prerequisites that would be demanding from the ABET school. So it's kind of hard.
It'd have to be math and science.
It's hard to make that.
And you're still passing those tests, and you're still getting 8 years of experience, for which can be evaluated and stress tests like we just did today. This applicant's coming up for an interview. So, all right. Well, that is all that we had on. And one more thing I wanted to, you'll notice on the agenda, there's no adjournment for the committees. It wasn't a typo. The reason why is there was in our last legislative session, it passed that they've mandated a public comment period related to items on the agenda. And so if you were to adjourn, then you'd have to do that public comment session every single time you meet because you're adjourning. But so there's 2 reasons that we're not going to adjourn our committees going forward. One, so we're not repeating that over and over again because we can do the comment period at the end of the committee report. So they can hit everything in the agenda and the committees right there at once. So for administrative efficiency, it just makes sense to do that. But also to keep our committees moving. For example, if I post something that says 10 o'clock is this committee meeting, and we have to meet at 10 o'clock, not sooner, 10 o'clock. Well, if we got done early today, and we are, we have some more time left on the clock, we can just move to the nominations committee without having to wait till 10 o'clock, you know? So, but since we're not adjourning.
One other point of business, since our chairman is not here and they normally report to the board, what we did today, will you do that?
Oh, certainly.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I can do that. Or you can name a representative if you wanted to, but I think we can sum it up. I've got the notes here.
As I named Glenn, what do y'all?
That's fine.
Looks unanimous. Thanks a lot. And then Rick, because he's also not here for the full board meeting, so then Melanie as vice chair will step into that role. Be gentle. All right. I think we're done unless you have anything else that you want to discuss. No? Okay. Oh, yes.
If they have a clerk meeting, could
Yeah,
you
sure.
maybe discuss who will represent them and how they want to do it, and share something or download?
Yes. There, we do have on the full board meeting agenda, as you know, this is sort of conference that, season. So we've got a lot of, things that we need to approve on the full board. You'll notice there under the director's report, on the board meeting a little further down, you can look on your agenda there on the iPad. You'll have the Tennessee Engineers Conference. And, let me get there myself. ACEC Tennessee, ASCE Tennessee section, Tennessee SEA, and TSP. That's a lot of acronyms, but basically all the engineers in this district are in this state coming together for Engineers Conference. It'll be at Franklin Marriott Cool Springs from September 17th to the 19th. At our last meeting, Casey mentioned that typically we have an engineer or two that historically have come to those and just, represent the board, speak to those attendees. So, and then there's and that'll be at the engineers luncheon the last day of the 19th. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's usually, like, for the 8 years I've been here, the PE luncheon on the last day is a board town hall, an AE board town hall. So I just thought maybe, Alton's done a few times, maybe he can comment. I just figure it'd be easier for y'all to figure out how you want to handle that in this meeting.
So, we're going to bring it up for the board, but to her point, if you guys want to hammer that out now, that would be fine, since it affects you primarily.
Historically, there's been 2 or 3 of us every time. When we presented the information about the rule changes, there were 4 of us. I think each one of us took one segment and presented it.
Would you be available on September the 19th?
I've already signed up for the conference, so yeah, I can.
So he's available.
But y'all have to approve as full
We will.
who is,
Yeah,
has the
because-
right to speak.
Exactly.
But what I'm trying to do is flesh out who's.
And I think we need to, we'll answer questions, but if anything like that, I think, we have to clarify, we are not speaking on behalf of the board.
You would, because any official sort of talking points from the board have to be approved by the board.
Yes.
So you are a board member, no one would, so that's not going to change whether you want to or not at this point, so there's stuff. But, so you can't disavow the fact that you are a member, you can't sort of decouple from that reality, but at the same time, too, you just have to clarify that you're not speaking for the board. So Alton, he's going to be there. Who else? And then from there, we'll figure out who's going to speak. But we know Alton is there. Who else?
I'm going to.
Okay, so Dr. Ash, Jason Carter, and Alton. Anybody else?
But as many as want to be there, I think it's good. As many as want to be on this, usually we're on a little stage and Casey introduces us, embarrasses really good before the.
All right. That seems appropriate. I wish I could be there. I'm gonna have to move my calendar. All right, so right now we've got Alton, Jason Carter, Dr. Ash, and we'll approve Mr. Barrick when he, just in case, since he's not here, an abstention, and then we'll need a speaker, so one person in particular. Alton, you wanted to sort of model that for him since you've already done that before and lived that. Would you be okay with that?
Are you okay with it?
Yeah, I mean, I
All right.
I want to make sure that when whatever you approve at the full board meeting, that y'all can figure it out. Like, a lot of times sometimes it's a panel, sometimes it's.
Normally it is, but there's usually somebody that leads.
So 4 people in attendance with anyone available to speak, and then you can work it out the day of.
Yeah.
Very, very fair.
Okay?
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, if all 6 of you wanna come, so everyone sees everyone, that would be great too. And Glenn, if you're gonna be there, that's, you know, I think it'd be, I don't care how you do it. I just want to make sure whatever gets approved later,
Tell you,
Gives
the
you
other
the
thing is, in case you, an agenda, normally we have something, I mean, we do answer questions, there's a question and answer period. But anything that's pertinent or recent or relevant, currently relevant, you know, that you think we ought to be present, like, for example, this alteration.
You can, they can hear you right there.
okay. Casey Anderson with ACC. I will say this, I don't think it's a terrible idea. My phone has rung off the hook with people who didn't realize that the rollover was over. We all know, and I'm really pushing hard on the email that you have connected to your license ought to be one you read. So you get this kind of information. You've talked about this information at that meeting.
Yeah.
But it's now that it's in effect, I think there's some people who are, you know, maybe talking about how when a rule change happens, how they are informed about that might be worse. Because boy, you would think y'all just did that out of nowhere.
And just, to that point too, there's an email, another reminder going out at the end of this week. It's already been approved, and so I've got that teed up. So they'll have, every licensee will have that email. Typically, we limit that to those that signed up, but something as important as that with renewals coming up, you know, we just sort of make the call that we'll push that out. So let them know to be looking for their email. If their email's changed, then they need to update that as well in their account, so they'll get that. All right, I think that's it. All right. I almost wanted to say adjourn, but we can't do that now since we haven't adjourned. So, what we're gonna do then is we're gonna move to the, and we can just take a break. We won't stop it, but a break, fine. Just break. Yeah. And then, we'll convene the nominations. All right. Current members are, Rick Thompson, Melanie Doss is Chair of Nominations Committee. They only meet once a year. Jeff Nally, he was just, I just surprised him with that. And, Robert Campbell, who was recently, replaced by, Jason Carter. And so Jason Carter's gonna step in for Mr. Campbell. And so, we'll just go down the roll. Rick Thompson, Melanie Doss. Here. Jeff Nally. Here. And Jason Carter. Here. All right. Melanie, if you would just sort of describe, typically the nominations committee, they set the slate or recommend to the full board a slate of officers. Those officers would be the chair, the vice chair, and secretary. And then by succession, they typically move up. The vice chair would become the chair, so Melanie Doss would be our chair next year. The secretary, who is Rob Barrick, would be our vice chair. And then the only thing you're really deciding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Melanie, I don't want to interrupt or get you off track, but would be the secretary. And so right now, what we have is Melanie moving up interior design to chair. We've got an engineer moving up to vice chair. So we probably need an architect. Is kind of what was to get full expression on those officers is where that's probably headed. But again, we'll just open this up for discussion, and then the committee can decide where they want to go forward. But typically, this is pretty straightforward. So, and a landscape architect as well. That's the architect. That's right. Qualified, doesn't it? Yeah. So, Melanie, from there, I'll let you decide.
Okay, so, if we can just kind of open it up for discussion, you know, as Glenn had stated, Rick Thompson is the current chair, and he will be rolling off in October. I will be stepping up, so Rick is an architect. So we would kind of like to give every professional a position. And so Blair actually, that would put it as a landscape architect.
I'm good. Okay. Then, Steve. We don't know these. So then, your if you want to restate then what that slate would be, what the recommendation is, and then the committee can decide if that's in fact the consensus, and then we'll offer that to the board at the meeting.
Okay, so the chair would be Melanie Doss, myself, the vice chair would be Rob Barrick, and, the secretary would be Blair Parker.
Now, to your fellow members, Mr. Nally and Mr. Carter, do you have any further comments or discussion as opposed, or as it relates to that slate?
You have to have a, does the committee have to vote on that?
They can, but we'll bring it before the board. They can, we'll memorialize that, so certainly that, so we can make sure that that is their recommendation. So, do we have a motion in that regard? Do we have a second? All right, all in favor? All right, any opposed? All right, looks like that is the recommendation then, the slate of officers for our full board meeting. Since we're not adjourning, I failed to mention that to, you were here when I mentioned that to the rest of the board, but we're not adjourning because we have a public comment section now. And we're just going to do that all at once at the full board meeting, whereas if you adjourn, you have to do that every single time at every meeting. So, but also for sake of efficiency too, because we can keep the committees moving without having to wait on pre-appointed times. So, and is there any other further discussion for the committee? All right, and that'll be effective in December. So October, the full board meeting will remain as it is, but then the new members will step into those roles on December. Good. All right. Chair, did you have anything else you'd like to say? All right. We are finished then. Thank you. We'll wait till 10:30 for our full board meeting.
So we take a break. Take a break and done.
That was easy. Okay, great. All right, welcome. It is August the 3rd, Thursday, and this is a regular scheduled meeting of the Board of Architectural and Engineering Examiners. And looks like we'll just go get started then. Rick Thompson is not here today. He is our chair, so in his stead, we'll defer to his vice chair, Ms. Doss. Would you call this meeting to order?
Hail to the chief.
That's right.
Call the, Architectural and Engineering Examiner Board, board meeting to order.
All right, well, then I'll take roll and we'll see if we've got a quorum. How about that? All right. We've got Blair Parker. Here. Brian Tibbs. Here. Melanie Doss.
Here.
Frank Waxer. Here. Dr. Ash Alfayed. Here. Jason Carter. Here. And Jeff Nally. Here. Rob Barrett. Rick Thompson. All right. Alton Hefco.
Above ground, vertical, and right here.
That's good news. Eddie Jett. Here. And James Collins.
Here.
We have quorum for announcements. First of all, I'd like, if you would allow me, I'd like to introduce our new member, Eddie Jett. There's been some movement in the chairs, so I wanted to address that. Eddie is coming to us from, he's got structural engineer, and he's a PE as well, and he's coming from Knoxville. And he's stepping in for Mr. Carter, because Mr. Carter is filling Mr. Campbell's seat. Mr. Campbell rolled off the board and has since expired, so Jason is stepping into that function, and then Eddie is backfilling his role. So a little bit of movement in the chairs there. And then we're going to have Robert. I asked him when he'd like to come back, whether it's August or October, so we can thoroughly embarrass him, and he chose October. So we'll present him with a plaque and fellowship with him a little bit afterwards and do all that with him. So we'll see him in October. Also have a new staff member. I want to introduce you as well. We're finally staffed as well, so that's been a great process. We've, like a lot of our boards and our staff as well, we have positions to fill periodically, and we've filled all that, and we're staffed. And Ashley Troboff, is she downstairs? Okay. She escorted you probably, and we saw her walking around. We moved some things around, wanted to kind of see folks, there's sort of proclivities towards certain licensure, and so we moved some folks around, and she's going to primarily be handling engineer apps. All right. Rob and Rick, they're both out due to traveling. Due to the AI conference in Memphis, Ashley Cates will not be joining us for the association or the professional society reports. But she didn't have anything to update. Now I suspect after after a conference, she'll have much more to give you at that time. And then I see Mr. Ridley coming in, and we've got Miss Anderson here as well. So we've got, and then we also have Hannah from the interior design. So we'll have society reports covered. So we'll cover the gamut. Also, I'd like to, before we get into the agenda, I'll pause for some more announcements. But before I forget, 'cause I'm prone to chase rabbits sometimes, as you probably noticed by now, I wanted to add two things to the agenda. The one, I'd like to add the CIDQ annual meeting to the agenda. And when we get to the agenda, we'll do that there. And we'll do that at the very end of the Tennessee Engineering Conference. We have some trips to or conferences that we need to approve. So I'd like to add CIDQ annual meeting there. And then also election of officers. We have a slate from our nominations committee. I didn't put on the agenda because I wasn't sure when that slate would develop. And we could typically wait till October to do that, like we've done before. But that's going to be a very busy meeting. So if we can move a piece, if we've got a slate of officers, it just makes sense to do that. So if you're good with that, we'll do that as well. All right, so any other announcements before we move on to the next item on the agenda? All right, hearing none then, we'll move on to the agenda. So I just make those recommendations. Any other comments or any additions or edits to the agenda? Okay. We'll just need a motion in that, or do we have a motion to accept the agenda with those two edits, the CIDQ annual meeting and the election of officers? So moved. Second. Okay, got a motion from Mr. Parker, got a second from Mr. Tibbs. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, hearing none then, that one was approved. And let's see, June minutes. I'll give you a second to look at that. All right, any edits to the June minutes? All right.
Mr. Chairman, I release the June minutes. I move that we approve. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
All right, thank you. And then our second was that, Blair? Yes, okay. All right, professional society reports. I think we'll take Ms. Anderson, would you mind?
Happy to. I'm Casey Anderson. I'm the Executive Director for ACC Tennessee. I also represent the Tennessee Society of Professional Engineers. I am going to start by reiterating something that I mentioned at the Engineers Committee, because I know there are some folks watching or listening, I suppose, today, trying to get their credits, their PDHs in, now that that's an option. There is some surprise in the world of people who have apparently not been paying all the attention that they should to the licensure requirements, and we're not aware that the rollovers are no longer an option, the rollovers of those PDH hours. So we are really making an effort to make sure every time I'm out talking to different groups, to make sure that they update their email address with the board, sign up for all of your emails, et cetera. I am really happy to know that you're going to send something out to all of the registrants. I think that's important. But maybe as you all are out and about and run into people, maybe a reminder that having that updated, I think some people put sort of their catch-all email address with their board stuff, thinking that that would be easier. And in fact, they might miss some important information. So I know I have told a few people that, as we have discussed in the last year or so, that dialing in to watch board meetings is in fact PDH worthy. So I know there's some people doing that. That's why I mentioned it again. We've got a couple of huge things happening in the short term. The Tennessee Engineers Conference is September 17th to 19th. I think we'll probably end up with 650, 700 people at that this year. Would imagine that actually after your email goes out, I would imagine we might be over 700 for some PDH, which will be tight. But I appreciate the full board's consideration of the engineering committee attending that and being a part of that, and we look forward to having Glenn attend that meeting as well. That'll be at the Franklin Marriott in Cool Springs. November the 7th, which is a Tuesday, is our Engineering Excellence Award. It will be at the Renaissance this year. I will make sure that everyone on the board is invited. You're welcome to attend. It's really a lovely event where we honor some of the best projects of the year. The first round of those, for anyone listening on the line, the first round, which is essentially a letter of interest to apply for those, is due next week. Looking forward to seeing what's out there this year. There's a lot of work on the street right now, so we're thinking there are going to be some really exciting projects coming through. We are doing a Risk Strategies Roadshow again, which we think has been pulled away from this meeting, which has been the problem in the past. The Risk Strategies it's really an ethical and ethics and risk management full-day seminar that will be on Friday, December 8th. It will be available both in person using the SSR office, Rob Barrett's office, in person, but it's also going to be available online. So we used to move that around the state, and the Nashville one typically was the day you all were here. So we've moved that so it's a hybrid meeting so that more people can attend. That is open to both architects and engineers. Both get credit for that, and it's an important one. So I look forward to having.
You know when you'll send? That's not out yet?
It's not out yet. It should be out in the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
I'm actually waiting for. I think we want to make sure we know exactly who's going to be speaking and that kind of stuff first. I'm waiting on Dale on that, but it should be coming shortly. And since Alton and I have been discussing it, I thought I'd bring it up. The Senior Principals Forum that we do for ACEC will be tentatively probably Friday, January the 12th. So mark that day on your calendar. It will be in downtown Nashville. Always a good meeting. And then I was also going to tell you that we are going to try to streamline. We are going to streamline our scholarship programs this year. We have a Tennessee Engineers Foundation that gives a number of scholarships to rising juniors and seniors, engineering students around the state. We also have some ACEC scholarships that go to the same. And this year, so all of those are going to now roll into one place that will make all of those winners eligible for national ACEC scholarships. This year, NCAAS has started a state-by-state scholarship. So they've put out 51 scholarships. All of those are going to be administered by the ACEC Research Foundation. And so the winners through Tennessee will also be eligible for that scholarship. So we're going to pick that one up too, and I will make sure, because that one I think involves you all on some level, and so I want to make sure that you're aware that we know that that's out there, and we are going to be working. So we will probably do a bigger blast than we have in the past, because this is there's a lot more money at stake for some of these students, a lot more opportunity. And so we will be pushing that really hard. We will also be working, I usually spend some time with the deans when they're here in October, making sure that they're aware of it and I have all that information to give them so that they can share it with their students as well. But we think that this will we think it'll be an easier process where you apply once and you have this option of lots and lots of, there's some structural specific scholarships, there's some surveyors, there's some, a whole realm of them that are also some DBE scholarships, a realm of opportunities, and then that new NCAAS scholarship that I think is a really important one. So that's all I have, unless you all have questions.
Thank you, Casey.
Thanks.
And just sort of as a matter of housekeeping while I'm thinking about it too, as you see, we don't have the microphones. I forget that you weren't here for the committee. So that's being recorded from there, and they can hear that. We tested that, so there won't be, you don't have to worry about microphones or anything like that. So that's nice. I think we need to put that downstairs, right? And then, trying to think. Oh yes, you'll probably notice on your agenda too, there's a public comment section. I meant to mention that when we did the call to order. There's a public comment period related to items on the agenda. I mentioned that to some of the committee members, but to our new members that are now joining us for the full board meeting. Due to legislative session, that's a requirement now to put at the end of the agenda. And so we're not going to be adjourning at the committee meeting for two reasons. One, if you adjourn, you have to do a pub section each single time. It just makes more sense to do that all at once. That way you're catching everything that was covered and transpired for all the committees. That's one, but then also two, for administrative efficiency, when we're doing the committee meetings, we can go one right after the other without having to wait on a pre-appointed time. So if you show up, you just hit them as we go and wrap it up. So, all right, so now I got out of the way. Hannah from Interior Design, please.
I'm Hannah Durham with ASID. I'm the current finance director and incoming president-elect. And I'm going to be presenting on behalf of both interior design organizations, ASID and IIDA today. So just to run through ASID quickly, we did have a NCIDQ study group successfully formed via Q Practice, and all members are scheduled to sit for the fall exam in October. Our national conference is August 13th through 15th in LA this year, and we do have a group of board members attending to represent Tennessee there. Our strategic planning meeting is scheduled for August 24th. This is where we plan to, for our budget for the year, so more to report after that. And then the new board for the 2023 through 24 year will be inducted on October 1st. Our annual Tennessee Chapter State Conference will take place September 28th. With our design awards at St. L, and then with a CEU and vendor program to follow on the 29th at the Franklin Marriott Hotel. All right, and going into IIDA, so Claudia is also in Memphis today for the AA conference, so I've been given her approval to go through some announcements there. Their annual board planning session is scheduled for August 12th through the 13th, so aligning right with ours as well. Their biannual Threads Fashion Show coming up on the 14th of September is at Of Arts Nashville. And they recently had their first meeting to kick off the Regional Chapter Leadership Council Planning, and that's held in Birmingham this year in October. And there were some questions on that actual date, and so we're waiting that when Claudia gets back. So joint between ASID and IIDA, a couple announcements. We did decide to hold off on a casual meeting in August for advocacy, just due to so many industry conflicts, and we instead decided to more focus on planning a larger joint event, which we'd already kind of talked about in October. And so we're looking tentatively at October 29th, just because it looks like there was no other events scheduled for that time that week. And it's also in celebration of Interior Design Awareness Month, so we thought that was pretty fitting. So again, we're continuing planning with that, so more details to come. And then we are also meeting with Ashley Case with AIA for just some, traditional planning and collaboration between organizations. We're doing that on August 22nd. So if anything comes from that, then we will keep you updated. Any questions on the interior design report? All right. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you. Mr. Ridley.
I'm glad we don't have to worry about Nathan speaking to the microphone.
Yeah. Because we don't want to miss anything, right?
Good morning. I'm Nathan Ridley. I'm here on behalf of the Tennessee chapter of the American Society of Landscape Architects. It's been busy. I missed the last meeting. I apologize for that, and then I was late today, so I'm on a roll. But grateful for your patience. Thanks for mentioning the professional development hour process. Our folks are sensitive to that. Not every time I see them, I try to talk about it. Respectfully, I disagree with not allowing the carryover hours, but that's another battle and another war, so I won't fuss about that today. I think y'all punish good behavior, but that's a whole other conversation. Thanks for the extra updates to remind folks of that. Cameron Yates of Memphis with DT Design is our new chapter president this year. We're excited for Cameron. We had a really good lunch and learn here for the Middle Tennessee section presented. Some of y'all might know Alan Stiegman is the executive director of the Tennessee Concrete Association. And for something that even a lawyer could understand, he said there's concrete that's cracked and there's concrete that's going to crack, or something like that. But it was helpful. There's a lot of imaginative uses you can use with the built environment. It's not just digging a hole and filling it up with for the footings that concrete's used for today. It's very important to the profession. Just sort of the civics bit here today. Today's election day in Davidson County. If you haven't voted, you can go vote. It's a regular polling place. Those are for Metro Nashville offices, the mayor and vice mayor and the council. here in Nashville, you have to get a majority of the votes cast in the election. We'll have a runoff on September the 14th, and that's expected.
How many candidates are there?
382.
We have 12 for mayor. Y'all can ponder this. You get 25 signatures on a petition, Alton. You and I can run for mayor. So the threshold is, or governor, so the threshold is pretty low. There are probably 30 candidates at large for the Metro Council, and there are 5 slots for that. Probably only one, an engineer, or my friend Berkeley Allen. I expect her to avoid the runoff here, but I think the other 4 slots might go to one. And those are low because we're off cycle. It's an odd number year, y'all know, so it's hard to drive a little turnout for that. On a personal note, my friend and a friend of the design professional community, Bill Beck, State Representative Bill Beck from here in Madison, passed away in June. And there's a special election today in the primary to fill his seat. His passing makes me sad. He was not only a lawyer, but I called him the Prince of Madison. If you ever went to lunch with Bill Beck in Madison, he couldn't eat. He's got to say hi to everybody that's coming up. So he's just a good guy with a booming laugh. And he was a Democrat in a majority Republican legislative body, but they still had respect and knew that he could disagree without being disagreeable. And sometimes we forget that. A big coup for the profession on the national level, landscape architecture has been recognized as part of the STEM program. Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and I think that might give us a bigger pool of applicants. And I think that was a good day at the office. For all people, the United States Department of Homeland Security, because they have control over immigration. So if you have a student that's here on an F1 or a J visa, I think those are for the students or the transfer programs, they can now stay for an extra 2 years. So that's a good thing to do, their practical experience. And the longer you stay, the more likelihood you're putting down roots and being able to get your green card and be able to stay forever. I'm talking too long, but lastly, just be sensitive. Our legislative friends will convene in special session on August the 21st to talk about public safety and guns. We have more guns than we have people in Tennessee. There are about 7 million, and nobody keeps count exactly of how many there are, but on a national level, there's 300 million Americans, about 400 million guns. So y'all are good at math, not me. That Governor Lee will have a proposal, or 2 or 3. He's not yet revealed that. He's having a hard time counting the votes. I mean, y'all have heard me say before, if you can get 17 votes in the Senate and 50 in the House, you can sell the Capitol, or you could change our gun law. But that's been a difficult. We've had one-on-one meetings. I don't mean to speak out of school. I've not been in the room, but from talking to some of our colleagues in the legislature, he's had one-on-one meetings, and it's just having a hard time getting folks to yes. So be an interesting, be sensitive, and maybe, I guess, on a personal level, a note or a card if you know you're a legislator, your state senator, or state House member, and tell them you're thinking about them. That's going to be a high-stress environment that week of August 21. That's all I have. Always grateful for your time and attention. Happy to respond to any questions, comments, observations. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, sir. All right. I don't think we have any other professional society reports with Ashley Cates being out, so I think we're ready for the director's report. The budget report is the first on the itemized underneath director's report, and that's going to be informational. There's no action there. Of course, I can field whatever questions you may have. Looks like the only thing we only had it May since our last meeting, so there's not a whole lot to look at or to update since we only have 1 month. If you look at the trending there, it's about it's just not too far from prior year as well. For our new member, Mr. Jetta, I'll just give you a sort of a quick run by of what you're looking at there. It's basically a P&L chart, you know, not to be crude, but profits, revenues, losses, expenses underneath that. And then you'll have either a deficit or surplus underneath this fiscal year, which ends in June, and then just below that, years prior trending, fiscal years prior, so you can sort of lump sum track that as well. As far as the different line items in there, Licensing revenue is pretty straightforward. That's just licensing revenue brought in. Case revenue is, just for action, fines, stuff like that. State reg fee is, if you're wondering why it's in brackets and it's not listed as an expense, you'd have to ask an accountant about that. But they told me that the term is a reduction in revenue, which sounds to me like an expense, but it's there. And so it's basically a workaround. We don't print those licenses. We have an departmental sort of process. F&A prints those licenses out, and then they charge that back to us, so they consider that not a true expense based, so the bean counters look at that as a reduction in revenue. You look a little further down there, you've got Edison, as well, and you've got administrative cost backs. Edison expenses, you're, now part of Edison. You're a part of the collective, So, that's basically where we pay our bills, and we also, reimburse for travel and, staffing expenses as well, things like that.
A few organizations reach out and say thanks for the grant,
Yes,
which I thought was interesting.
yes, sir. And, I know you've, and I appreciate you deep diving into all that. And he's had a sort of a short runway. We gave him his orientation probably just a couple weeks ago, and here you are. So there's a lot of catching up to do, but he's doing great. Then right below that, Edison, is basically sort of our accounts payable. Anything that we could itemize or that would be paid out of that will come out of there. However, not everything is just easily enough sort of itemized, and so administrative cutbacks are those things that we share the expenses across the board, but still would fall underneath those itemized items, such as data processing, rent, telephone. We got to keep the lights on, but we share that with a lot of folks, right? Boards, fire, insurance, securities, and so they break that down based on proportion of imprint of those boards, and that would be licensing pool, complaints, and just overall budget plan. That goes into a formula, comes out, that's your percentage. So obviously we're going to pay more than maybe a tiny board like court reporters, but then so we'll pay more than them, but we're going to pay a lot less than, let's say, Cosmo and Barber with 70,000 now licensees. So that's how they work that out.
Glenn,
Yes, sir.
if I may ask, I'm looking at the numbers and I see August is 94.7 basically, which is triple what most of the others are. And then you bump over to February of 23 and that's 443. What would the big difference be there?
I'm trying to track. Where you at?
Just the top column, trend, Edison expense total.
If you look at that next.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
it knocked that back down.
What is the other?
Oh,
Just curious.
you're
That's fourth line down.
Oh, I see. I'm tracking there with you. Oh, okay, yeah.
In February of 23.
Okay, yeah.
That's
That's
the grant
That's your grant.
colleges.
Yeah.
That's our
Okay.
big expenditure every year.
That makes sense.
Yeah, no, that would catch my attention too. So that's also why you have, if you look all the way down to that, you have a deficit, which runs every February. And that's because that's when they pay into that. Okay. Yeah. We write the contracts early in February, and then those checks get cut about middle of February as well. And we'll be receiving, since we're talking about grants, we'll be receiving those proposals by the 1st of September. So we've got another month, and then we'll pour over those, and then come October, they'll be making their presentations. And right now, that's in room 1A, but come the next couple of weeks, I'll get a firm deadline on what's going to be available capacity-wise, technology-wise down there, and then I'll let you know if we're going to be here or if we're going to end up off-site somewhere else. But right now, I'm hopeful that we're going to be here, but you know how that goes. You can't really know until you get into the wall, so I can, now that they're on site and they're into the wall, then I can see kind of how that progress is going, if they're going to stay on track. But so the next couple of weeks, we'll expect a response there. So you go down a little further, of course, salary, technology, those are the same line items you see in Edison. Oftentimes, that they don't need, we don't have necessarily a column for that, so then we put it under administrative cost backs, and so they'll be listed there. You have legal cost backs. Of course, anytime our attorneys are working on the legal report or they're working on a rules package, that's time that where anytime we pull a steward for those type of projects, that's a billable hour. I mean, sometimes he'll just put the clock right in front of me and just click as I'm talking. It's distracting. conduct, investigations and perhaps.
We have used that in the past.
That's right. And we do have contracts for that, should we need an expert reviewer, and you'll see that line item there, should we make that expenditure. Centralized complaints, customer service, really the same thing, that's our call center. So anybody that's reaching out, either they have a customer service issue, or they have a complaint they want to file, or a question about either, they're calling CSE and they bill us for that. And that's it. Any, questions? All right, that was informational purposes only, that was go to the high flyover, but as you get into it, if you have any questions about line items, you can just reach out to me direct too, and then I'll be happy to answer those. All right, it looks like we're ready for, as you know, this is,
One thing for clarification's sake, I know we talked about this earlier this year, and usually we sort of vote on the budget in October. And we had talked about changing the grants to colleges from, and again, one of the things we look at, if you look at the bottom line, look what our reserve funds are, generally the state wants 1.5 to 2 years.
2.5 now, you know.
Okay. And we've got that easily. And so what we had elected to do earlier this year, but I don't think it got fully implemented, but we'll bring up in October, is modifying the grants to colleges from $400,000 to $450,000.
Yeah, that, the board did approve, that as far as saying that's the direction they want to go, and that's all that's needed from the board. There's no further action, but to say, that's our intent, that's what we'd like to see at that time. But that's not, in statute, that's in the appropriations bill. And so every single cycle, they bring that, as you know, when they're sort of deciding what bills they're going to pay for the year, forward. Those are one of the things that just historically have found their way in the appropriations bill. And so, you know, I'm still in conversation with our administration about that, about bringing that up. But again, we're beholden to their timeline, but there's nothing further from the board, but necessary on that one, but to articulate your well what you've done, and I'm taking that forward. And so I'll have updates as I have them, but I'm still tracking that one.
Yeah, and it's, the reason that's important is because when we decide how the allocations are gonna be made, we need to know whether we're working with 400,000 or 450,000. That spreadsheet is bad enough the way it is. And, I don't wanna have to go back and re-enter data into that anymore than I have to.
No, that's right, and that's why we locked that one down. I can, you know, just like before we started this grant season, I pulled the appropriations bill and just, I wanted to physically see it. And so when I saw the 400, then we know the letters that went out said 400. And then it also tells me that, you know, this is the time during that early period to have those discussions with the folks that formed that bill. So, you know, we're having those discussions now. You know, I can't tell you for certain that it'll be there even the following year, but we're going to carry it forward and make them aware of it.
I think the other reason that's important is we've talked about now that on the engineer's path to licensure, we've got the engineering technology component, which will add, well, I think there are 9 colleges. So we don't want to necessarily reduce the amount that we're given, or we have allocated to the existing recipients, so that $450,000 would give us that $50,000 buffer to help pay for that without reducing or cutting anybody else.
It kind of works out, though. I mean, just from a practical standpoint, that we didn't up it at this point, just because we're seeing the results of total compensation working its way through, and we're thankful to the governor that he's he made that calibration to market. You know, we had a lot of workers that were well below the market for their job line and for their job description. So in bringing that, leveling that off, we were grateful for that. So retain and to recruit the talent that we need going forward. You know, so I'm very grateful for that. But so we're going to watch that. We've also got a new reg access. When you do renew, you'll see that. But that contract's being renegotiated, and that's going to be shared across the boards. So there's going to be a hit there. We haven't seen that one yet. So, and I'll keep you updated every step of the way when we get there. But we're still waiting on that. And we've also saw basically that pipeline, it does feel like it's restricting a little bit as far as revenue. And how do we know that? We're looking at engineering and architect, landscape architect, interior design school enrollments. We've been seeing some of the numbers on that showing just a slight decline, but we haven't seen enough there data to know that that's a trend. But that's the pipeline that brings those professions to us. And so we're just gonna keep an eye on all of that. So we're at a good place. We're certainly more than the 2.5 that they required, but not as much as you would think, because if you look at our budget, it's like $1 point-something million, is what we're spending. Well, I mean, 2.5, so you're looking at, we're pushing close to 3, and that's about where we're at. And that's without those hits. So, you know, I think we're at a good place, and I'm very, very thankful that we're not at least we're not having to make really tough decisions as it pertains to the budget, but we do have some developments that we're watching, and over the course of the year, hopefully we will have some more information on the contract for the licensing platform we're using, but also I'm hoping to get some more on the training as well. Any more questions as far as the budget? All right, looks like, you know, it's this time of year, as you know, August and October is basically conference season. Things are started kicking back up, and you have the year in review. A lot of folks have met, so it's time to make those decisions. Now, those happen at the conferences. You know, consolidating governance, NCWS with the pathways, and so we have basically a slate here for you of conferences that we just need approval for to send members to. That's going to be the CLARB annual meeting, ASLA conference, the Tennessee Engineers Conference, CIDQ, and then and then we have after that with the election of officers. So, CLARB annual meeting, the Council of Landscape Architectural Registration Board's CLARB annual meeting is in Henderson, Nevada, and that will be from September 20th to 22, and we just need to vote to approve travel for Blair to represent the board. So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Yeah, you need 1 second, but that's okay. I didn't mean to derail you. Do we have a second? Oh, do we have a first motion?
I made a motion.
We snuck that in. I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Thank you. We got well, we got Blair out there anyway. Oh, there we go. Thank you. That's all right. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. I'm just trying to make sure I get your records, because just in case I get nervous when we get off our regular path. All right. ASLA conference, American Society of Landscape Architects Conference in Minneapolis. That's October 27th to 30, and then Blair for that one as well.
Motion to approve. Second.
I got it.
Yeah. Is there any discussion or anything? Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
You got it. She's a pro, isn't she? Got it dialed in. All right. Tennessee Engineers Conference. We did have a discussion in the engineering committee about that. That one is all the professional associations for engineers coming together, and it's their collective conference. That will be in the Franklin Cool Springs area, September 17th to 19th. Ms. Anderson mentioned our last meeting that we typically have a presence there, a round table or sort of a discussion group. And so that'll be facilitated by current board members. We just need approval for those, and that'll be at the engineers luncheon that last day, the 19th. At that time, it was decided that it looked like Alton, Mr. Carter, Dr. Ash, and then we wanted to give approval for Mr. Barrett, since he wasn't present, just in case he had any interest, especially being local as well. And okay, so then Mr. Jett as well, so. James, we'll just, everybody in the name of
And Glenn, do we have to approve you also?
You don't, which is, just administrative, they kind of assume that I'm sort of the baggage that they put underneath the plane, you know?
Okay.
Yeah, so also basically all of our engineers, and then of course, as your schedules permit, you know, then, you can work out that, but, and then you'll get your assignments, but Alton, he's our seasoned professional there. I'm sure that you're all in trouble.
We're in trouble.
Bail money, maybe we should have some discussion about.
Second.
See, we can agree on something.
Yeah.
So, just need approval on that.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right. Great. So then we have the CIDQ annual meeting. The Council for Interior Design Qualification annual meeting is in Louisville, Kentucky. So we got to keep Mixed Off close by that, apparently. So November 10th to 11th, we just need approval for that.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion
Looks like the only thing that, that we also added under the CIDQ was the election of officers. I wanted to wait to see how that slate was gonna go. We had some vacancies, but, they did a great job filling that. Ms. Doss, of course, stepped in, she's the chair of that one. Mr. Carter stepped in for, Mr. Campbell, in his new role. And of course, Mr. Nally participated as well. And, I think we have a slate, so, I think, yep, Ms. Doss, if you'd like to introduce that slate to us.
And nominations committee put forward the following slate. Melanie Doss, myself as chair, Rob Derrick as vice chair, and Blair Parker as secretary.
Any discussion, any comments?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to approve the slate.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
All right. And those folks will be, we'll continue with our current officers in place for council. We'll wrap up the October meeting, and then they'll start in those new, positions come, December. All right. Really, you guys are efficient. All right. Looks like we are, at committee reports. My notes. In the absence of, Mr. Barrick, he's our chair for that committee. And then upon discussion and I think a conspiracy from Mr. Heathcote, I ended up having to give I'll be giving a report for that one. So, we basically, there was two things. We have an application review, and our applicant, he was taking pathway number 2, and then so, we really had a discussion really about progressive experience, without getting you all the nuts and bolts of that. We decided that it was probably best for a civil engineer, since this is a person's specialty, to really qualify that experience and get into to specify whether or not that truly is progressive as determined by statute. And so, they're gonna take that grid before them and, reach out to our applicant and, dig into that experience. And then also, some references as well, so that pertains to the experience as well. Probably need another reference on that. But a really good discussion, a very productive discussion. So, and if they're satisfied that meets the definition of progressive experience, that engineer who's qualified to, certainly to approve that application will do so. But if they have more questions, they'll bring that back to the committee to represent, like we've done like we do with our legal cases. So something else to present up, and we'll bring that to the full committee for further discussion. And then we were able to branch off from there to a discussion about the pathways, the application reviews, pathway number 3 in particular. The board, if you recall from the rules, did not qualify the undergraduate degree. You remember that robust discussion we had some time ago, last year. And so, but what that left though on the table was the master's degree. That was never really discussed. And so we had now our opportunity to come to some sort of consensus about that. However, in pathway number 4, there's language that is useful. It was very helpful. Mr. Heathcote provided some of that language when that was particularly written. So what the committee decided at that time was to take that language that's in pathway 4 and port that into basically by application, by practice, into pathway number 3. So in essence, where it says the master's degree is to be approved by the board as being of satisfactory standing, that would be determined that that master's degree, the engineering degree, would be from an institution with an ABET EAC accredited undergraduate engineering program approved by the board as being of satisfactory standing. That's in pathway 4. That was language directly from there. To keep the pathways consistent, ABET EAC is how we, or its equivalent is how we qualify the undergrad degree in pathway 2. That's how we qualify the degree in pathway 4, or the master's degree in pathway 4, and now we're using that same standard in pathway 3 to qualify the master's degree there as well. Some consistency. And that's not to remove anyone's discretion as the board decided. Obviously, they still retain full discretion to make decisions on what is equivalent and whether that's an engineering degree, because that's not a rule or statute. But it provides some consistent standards for them to expedite those applications before them, knowing that there's a consensus among the committee on that item. Any other questions or comments as it pertains to that? All right, that was our committee reports. Thank you for your work. I appreciate that. That'll be really helpful going into this next season for all of us. All right, before we get to legal, we put the public comment period related to items on the agenda. We've done that before the legal report for one primary reason, because we don't want to prejudice the legal report for someone talking about their cases and thereby, making that, impossible or difficult. And we want to make sure that we protect the due process. And so those comments will come directly before the legal report, and only before the legal report. And then after that, you have a training presentation demonstration about a refresher as it pertains to Sunshine Law. And no one's picking on you, all the boards are getting it. We just do this once a year typically, just so folks can be reminded of what those requirements are as it pertains to each of our responsibilities as a board. All right, so I'm going to check this sign-in sheet. I don't see any public, but there's somebody, we do have an escort that was bringing them up to the building. I'm going to see if there's any sign in. Do we consider Casey Anderson, Nathan Ridley, and Hannah Durham as public? No, I think they. All right. Seeing that we don't have any public, additional public, and we have our associates already gave their report, I think we're free to move on then. But typically, what we would do is we're going to continue to do that as a matter of process, and then limit them to 3 minutes to items as it pertains to agenda. Obviously, they can't just sort of.
They can be here in person, or can they be joining online and request?
They can join online as well. So that's fine.
Do they have to request permission to speak to the board?
They would go in the chat box and ask to be for that opportunity. So
Nobody.
No.
Oh, okay.
that's kind of hurtful, wasn't it? All right. So hearing no public comments, I think we're ready to move to the legal report at this time.
Number one on the report, 2023-017-541. On 6/30/2022, complainant executed an agreement with respondent to perform septic design services and TDEC permitting for a two-phase project consisting of 5 cabins in the first phase and 1 cabin and 4 treehouse hospitality units in the second phase. Respondent produced the first phase final septic designs for permitting on 9/29/22 and filed for a TDEC permit on behalf of complainant on 7/11/22. Complainant claims that despite being paid in full for the above referenced designs and permitting services, respondent failed to obtain the TDEC permit and complete the process. On 11/16/22, respondent delivered the preliminary septic system design documents for the second phase of the project and was paid in full for these services on 12/2/22, but has failed to deliver stamp drawings and TDEC permits. Complainant alleges respondent has acted without integrity and honesty by not complying to the terms that he is contractually obligated. Respondent states all terms of the contract have been completed and denies any wrongdoing. Respondent claims that complainant wanted to revise the design that would essentially make it illegal, and respondent refused to do so, even though complainant used threats through legal action. This was reviewed by board member Rob Barrett. Mitigating factors here, there's no evidence of wrongdoing, and the recommendation is to close.
Make a motion to approve staff recommendation.
Second. Now, the discussion. Any discussion?
We get
All in favor?
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Number two, 2023-024-321. Respondent self-reported practicing on an expired license. The license lapsed on 6/30/21, and there were 2 projects that respondent stamped in January and February of 23 while expired. Respondent states that it was not until May of 23 when respondent went to renew that he realized it expired. Respondent had semi-retired in 2017, and most projects were handled by the new leadership up to the end of 2022. Partnership transition failed in January of '23, forcing respondent back into the office to wind up project. Respondent has since renewed the license. This was reviewed by board member Brian Tibbs. Mitigating factors is self-reported. Aggravating factor is stamping plans on expired license. Recommendation is to authorize a civil penalty of $1,000 by consent order and formal charges for practicing on expired license and pass the laws and rules exam.
Motion? Discussion?
Just for clarification, $1,000, since there were two, he spent two sets of plans, $500 per plan, that's what we had done in the past, so that's really $1,000 anyway, yeah, okay.
All in favor?
Uh,
Opposed?
This is really a quiet crowd.
It really is, isn't it? We're in the new. Just wait till next.
Number 3, 2023-030-901. Respondent self-reported practicing on an expired license. Respondent explains that he believed that on 11/22/22, he renewed the license by submitting the required application in PDH, then paying the fee. Respondent claims there was no notification that the renewal fee wasn't received. On 6/11/23, respondent learned that the license lapsed on 11/30/22 and determined that the credit card was not charged. Respondent states that this was unintentional clerical error. Respondent provided a list, and it was determined there were 23 projects stamped in the expiration period, and respondent has since renewed the license. Reviewed by board member Alton Heathcote. Mitigating factors self-reported, attempted to renew on time, however, unintentional clerical error in renewing, aggravating factors, stamping plans on expired license. Recommendation is authorized civil penalty of $4,600, which is $200 per project by consent order, and formal charges for practicing on expired license and pass the laws and rules exam.
Just if I could, one of the reasons for reducing the civil penalty portion of that is a lot of the things we stamp as reports or letters. They weren't planned. And I didn't think that rose to the level of the full $500 to $1,000 charge.
Motion?
I have a question. When someone renews, do they get a notification that, yeah, this is successful and you're renewed? So should he have had something to know that he didn't receive it, therefore he had not renewed?
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha.
And normally, and I took that into consideration because that's one of the things that I know, I think all of us probably know to kind of look for. Hey, look, where's the certification that you received my payment? And I review the credit card bills every month, so, you know, I generally know. So I didn't want to excuse it completely, but I thought that was a fair assessment. But yes, in answer to your question, yes, you do get a notification.
Motion approves that recommendation.
I second the motion.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Number 4, 2023-025-121. Complaint alleges respondent is advertising, quote, in-house engineering on its website and LinkedIn profile. Respondent is not registered as an engineering firm. Respondent claims they do not self-perform engineering, but instead partner with engineers and firms to perform the services. Respondent claims they do have electrical engineers on its payroll, but do not design or stamp drawings. The website states respondent partners with elite engineers to provide owners, and it continues to go on. After review of the website, the services offered page states as follows: each and every electrical installation is fully staffed with respondent's personnel. We can offer you valuable engineering expertise if necessary, ensuring a cost-effective, common-sense approach. Under the experience, it states respondent has more than 20 years of average experience from designing to engineering and complete installation of electrical systems. Our personnel of managers, electricians, electrical engineers, and support are all outstanding in their respective fields. This was reviewed by Board Member Rob Barrett. Recommendation is authorize a civil penalty of $1,000 by consent order and formal charges for advertising engineering services without being registered.
I do have a question. We've had this a few times before, and maybe I kind of take this too personally, but when somebody advertises and holds himself out as an engineer, people are hiring them predicated on that education experience. I know that that we have the ability to also issue letters, either letters of warning, letter of caution, letter of instruction. I wonder if we shouldn't consider adding. I'll leave that to you to determine what level of letter we need to give them to ensure that they clearly understand why they can't do this, but I'll also include in the recommendation issuance of a letter.
Well, we do have a letter of caution, which is not really formal. It doesn't really go on the record. Just kind of stating that we see.
So they're not licensed, so they wouldn't have a record anyway.
Right. And
I just want them to clearly understand why they can't do this.
right. And typically in the consent order, we explain what they're doing wrong. And then you'll have the statute that says you have to be licensed to state that you're an engineer. So in that consent order, they're getting that information, like you're saying. If we put it in a letter, it's in that consent order.
Okay.
To me, there are several things here that they have 2 or 3 electrical engineers. Are they licensed? I'm assuming they are.
I would think they're probably under contract.
One of the things they said in the details, I think, was that they team with other firms.
Essentially, they have electrical engineers on payroll.
Yes, that is another thing that they said. They do team with people that are licensed, but I don't think their staff is necessarily licensed. They hold themselves out as licensed professionals, but apparently from Rob's research, that really wasn't the case.
It gets confusing there, and I shift this over to landscape architecture. Is it okay for a firm? And I believe we've had this discussion before with regard to architecture. Is it okay for someone to say we are practicing landscape architecture, but in essence, they don't have a licensed landscape architect?
Correct.
That. So, to me, that's a really funny kind of area right there. And that's what I see here with this.
They have licensed engineers on, if they did have licensed engineers on the payroll, they should know better than this. Just by being a part, they should be aware of.
And I can tell you with some of the larger contractors that we deal with, they have PEs on staff, and how they recognize themselves in their emails and whatever, they don't necessarily, they will call themselves PEs, but they also have degreed engineers. And they change that designation, but are they practicing engineering or not? I mean, maybe that's clear. Maybe that's easier to say, no, they're really not. But there's a lot that goes into this for me.
I agree.
One thing I see here, if this is correct, it says the respondent finds they do have electrical engineers. Well, that's saying they have licensed engineers. Say, yeah. And, my question is that right or isn't? And if it isn't, then that's definitely, I'm not,
Yeah, that did not read PEs.
Well, and, okay, so the other part of my question is, this is an engineering firm. I don't know if that's 2 people or 200. But anyway, $1,000, that's a slap on the wrist. And
they'll go with pay $1,000 going about this. I'm not sure, I know we have, limitations on fines for individuals, but is there any difference in fines for engineering departments?
If they're not a firm, what recourse do they have? Can they choose? Can they say, we're not gonna pay that? They're not.
Yeah, they can say that. We still can bring them to a formal hearing. If it gets to that point. If you want to increase the penalty, you can say it's 1,000 per violation, which there are two parts of the website that claim they've got engineers. You know, and what's odd about this is that they claim that they partner with engineers, but then they say, oh, we've got engineers on staff. You know, and then electrical engineers and, you know, I think they're contractors than actually engineers.
They're doing installations, which implies that they're contractors.
So the project managers and installers.
Yes.
In essence.
Yeah.
The phrase in-house engineering suggests to me that they have PEs within the walls of the company.
And their experience, they designing engineering, design engineering, which is, that should be mentioned in the letter.
And we can also include in there that they have to take that off their website.
We've done that before too.
Is there anything that would require them to state that they're not licensed? They're not, like some disclaimer on their website that would make that clear.
Actually, they'd have to remove the reference to engineers.
Right. They just have to remove that reference.
So is this being interpreted that they are practicing without a license?
They're advertising. They're holding themselves out as being licensed professionals.
Whether they're practicing as an engineer,
It's not.
it's different than what they're doing. They're holding themselves out as licensed engineers.
Because practicing without a license is a significant infraction. That would be much more, this will not apply to how to resolve the solution. So right now, we're simply addressing the advertising.
Right.
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we authorize a civil penalty of $2,000 by consent order when we charge it for advertising engineering services without being registered, and for them to remove any indication of engineering from their website.
Discussion? All in favor? Opposed?
Good recommendation.
That's the end of the legal report.
Okay, Chris is gonna pass out the handout for each of you. Our students are gonna go over all the training of our sunshine, or sort of our in-service training. We got like 2 and a half minutes. You guys watch your step everywhere you go. We've got like an obstacle course with wires everywhere. Yeah.
For my sunshine.
I didn't come up with that.
Oh, come on, Stuart.
Just gonna say.
So in front of you is just a printout of what I'm going to present today, and it's about the Open Records and Public Meetings Act. Just want to let you know that this is just informational only. This is nothing that will be handed out or disseminated or anything like that. We'll be taking this back up at the end of the presentation. So the Open Records Act is codified in Tennessee Code annotated 10-7-503. And what is included in open records for a board or commission? So public records or state records include documents, media, electronic data processing files and output, other materials regardless of physical form or characteristics, as long as it's made or received pursuant to law or ordinance or in connection with the transaction of official business by any governmental entity. What's not included is the actual devices or equipment that information is displayed. So in other words, everything that's on your iPad is open records, but the iPad itself is not. So the Public Meetings Act, codified in Tennessee Code annotated 8-44-101. What is the Public Meetings Act? It's meetings of a government body that should be held and open in order to comply with the intent and spirit of the Sunshine Law. Also, like, what is it? We'll see, what is a meeting and what is not. We'll also look at what is required for a meeting covered under the Public Meetings Act, and we'll also look at what happens if a board violates the act. So the definition is under TCA 8-44-101A. The General Assembly hereby declares it to be the policy of this state, and the formation of public policy and decisions is public business and shall not be conducted in secret. In Tennessee Code annotated 8-44-102A, all meetings of the governing body are declared to be public meetings open to the public at all times, except as provided by the Constitution of Tennessee. So the Public Meetings Act applies to every meeting of a board or commission. So what is a meeting? Well, a meeting means the convening of a governing body, of a public body, for which a quorum is required in order to make a decision or to deliberate toward a decision on any matter. This includes committees and subcommittee meetings. What is not a meeting? Lunch breaks, restroom breaks, smoke breaks, recesses between morning and afternoon sessions, adjournments between days of multi-day meetings. These, they're not meetings, but at all times, the board's business should not be discussed. So, like I said, under the Public Meetings Act, regular meetings and special meetings count as meetings and are subject to the Act. The only exception is executive sessions. The executive sessions occur when one or more members meet with the board's attorney, and the board is under a lawsuit or has been threatened with suit, and the members ask their attorney questions related to such a suit. The Public Meetings Act, electronic attendance. So if there's one or more members that cannot attend a meeting in person, then under 8-44-108B1, 2, if those members present in person make a quorum, then the meeting may proceed as normal with the other members participating by phone or electronic means of communication. However, per department policy, any member attending by electronic means of communication does not count towards a quorum. So physical in-person quorum is still required. Just as we said, this year, July 1st, the public has a right to attend and observe the meetings, but they don't have a right to participate. However, the department does permit now public comment, so long as the comment is not disruptive to the flow of the meeting. I'm not going to get into the court cases. So there's a three-pronged test for adequate public notice. Number one is the contents of the notice must reasonably describe the purpose of the meeting or the proposed action to be taken. Number two is notice must be posted at a time sufficiently in advance of the actual meeting in order to give citizens both an opportunity to become aware of and to attend the meeting. Number three, notice,
Quick question. Sufficiently in advance. Sounds pretty.
I think it's like most days,
7 days.
yeah, 7 days notice.
The agenda on the website.
And we put it on because like number three says notice must be posted in a location where a member of the community could become aware of such notice. So typically it's on our website, on the board's website. The Tennessee, the Attorney General posted an opinion, posting a notice online to meet the adequate public notice requirements is contingent on facts and circumstances behind the posting, and whether the location would be one where members of the community could become aware of the notice. So that's why our usual practice is to publish on the board's website. Whether public notice is adequate is in all the facts and circumstances analysis, and no single factor is positive. What they're trying to say, what the Court of Appeals said here is that all of those three parts, the content, the timing, and the location, are all equally important. The Public Meetings Act is designed to make sure all board business is conducted in a way accessible to the public. It applies to you both as an individual member and collectively as a board. All gatherings of more than one member are meetings and are covered under the Act, including regular, special, and emergency meetings, and including committee and subcommittee meetings. The only exception is the executive session, which your opportunity to ask your board attorney questions when anticipated of litigation, but you may not deliberate or decide. For every meeting, you must give adequate public notice in content, location, and time. So if you violate the act, then those acts are void. Those decisions are void. And also, cost of litigation may be assessed against the board. And this comes from the North Carolina Board of Dental Examiners versus FCC. In 2015, the United States Supreme Court ruled North Carolina State Board of Dental Examiners versus Federal Trade Commission that board members may not be subject to immunity for their actions on the board. In North Carolina, the North Carolina board made a decision forbidding non-dentists from providing teeth whitening services. The Supreme Court held that the board's action were not entitled to certain Federal Trade Commission's antitrust immunity. The court determined that a non-sovereign actor, which is the board, controlled by active market participants, which is board members who participate in the regulated profession, enjoy state action immunity from federal antitrust liability regarding anti-competitive conduct only if, one, the challenge restraint imposed by a non-sovereign actor is one clearly articulated and affirmatively expressed in state policy, and two, that the policy is actively supervised by the state. Tennessee responded to the court's ruling by enacting TCA 4-4-126 in order to protect board members providing review of board actions that may constitute potentially unreasonable restraint of trade or anti-competitive actions. Further, the CDCI, or Department of Commerce and Insurance, has designated our deputy commissioner with responsibility to actively review board actions and assist boards when needed. As always, please direct any questions to the board director or attorney.
Let's do it. Do you mind just one more kind of a quick summary of that little piece you just said? Yeah. Do you mind doing that? Like not so legal.
You don't mind explaining in the North Carolina?
Yeah, just that last part, like, because the reason why I was curious, because it started off about what we could be specifically held liable for. So could you just, just in your words, just in Stuart's words.
Oh, well, dangerous. So if there's a decision that could potentially violate some type of competitive law, anti-trade, because if you make a decision against a fellow competitor out there, that could violate that law, that could violate antitrust and competitive laws, then you could potentially, as a board and an individual member, be liable and be sued for that. You don't have that immunity that you typically have. So what Tennessee has done, and all the states have done because of this ruling, they review every board meeting, every commission meeting. And we go through and make sure that there's not any red flags, is what they call it, so that we're protecting the board and the individual members.
Okay, thank you.
It's really hard not to go legalese.
We talked about that in our orientations. One of the things that, is, we have a policy director. She listens to all of our board meetings. Her name is Sheree Anderson. And, she'll give us instruction if we start getting that territory. And Stuart's great. He's gonna, if we start getting some of that territory, he'll let you know. He'll start steering you away from that, saying, hey, and that'll happen with, we could have some anti-competitive concerns here, and then we'll all, have that discussion around the table, so.
Wasn't the perception in North Carolina that the action the board took was blocking free trade?
It was. I mean, well, when you have dentists saying that people can't sell teeth whitening and kiosk at the mall, that's egregious. That's overreaching.
But the steps is
Right.
protect health,
Yeah.
the welfare of the public.
And in court saying that you don't have this immunity is not so broad that you can just sort of use it to do whatever you want. You know what I mean? Use it as cover. That was the point. And so, but so they put that three-prong test that Stuart was talking about, and one of those is having that policy director review our decision to make sure that remains intact, which is what we want. Otherwise, we never have any board members that want to serve anywhere. I mean, that's why would they? So every state's doing that.
And as Liz said, we have a designated person that does that under the deputy commissioner. Other than rulemaking and supervising officials shall evaluate whether the action may constitute a potentially unreasonable restraint of trade that requires further review. If it is determined that action requires further review, we provide notice to the board within 10 business days that the action is subject to further review. We review the full evidentiary record regarding the action, and if necessary, supplement the evidentiary record or direct the regulatory board or other involved persons or entities to supplement the record. Conduct a review of the substance of the action, de novo and on the merits, and in writing, we either approve the action, remand the action, or veto the action. And that is the quick review of the Sunshine Laws Open Meetings Act. And of course, if you ever have any questions, you can always email me and Glenn. Don't include another member on those emails, even if it's a committee member or a board member. Always just go directly to me and Glenn, or to Glenn, and he can come to me. And if there's anything that needs to go to another member, of course, we will go to that member separately.
And oftentimes the committee has important work that requires collaboration. I have that with other boards as well. And so to produce a work product and to collate all that information, the different contributions, you'll bring that to me. I put that together, collate that in a work product for which you can do in an open session with everybody else in the meeting. Chair, that is all of our business on our agenda, so we're at new business and adjournment.
Anyone have new business?
Mr. Chairman, I do. Having reviewed our website, I know the thing I was honing in on was, I know we've passed and the law has been enacted, that revises the building codes that we followed. And it used to be the 1985 standard building code, and then it had definitions of occupancy types and the law that was set out. And now it's been revised to where it shows in the law that simplifying, and we're following the International
building code that's been accepted by the state property. But on our website, we have two things that I know of. One is a reference manual, and the other is I think it's recommending design requirements for architects and engineers. And both of those still have on there the 1985 standard book. And so, especially the reference manual, I would hope that immediately, if not sooner, that it's at least take a website that under construction, whatever. I also assume that would be a thing staff would do.
Yes, sir. I've written it down. If you could just reference manual, and you said what was the other item?
Okay.
Well, just when you find it,
But if you go on the website,
So what is there is the 1985 city building code. So, it's in the manual, so you're suggesting that it's the updated.
yeah. The other part is if, again, when I do it on my cell phone, I get a little different thing than I get on my laptop or something. But, it has requirements of designers, I think, is a line item that's a link, and it does the same thing. The rest.
And as you, this is a great opportunity because I'm marking that now, but
There are other things. too.
yeah, that's what I was going to say is that there's a lot out there probably, you know, things are changing so quickly. And so we want the most current information that's possible. So, you know, as you go throughout the week, if you see something, you know, as they say, you see something, say something, just let me know and then I can work on it. It's typically a pretty quick fix. Matter of fact, just yesterday, we had a one-stop, it's basically a reference that shows what the requirements are for each profession, and engineers was missing. Well, I talked to Webmaster and said, no, well, where's it at? And then we had engineers, engineer intern twice, and he looked, I said, can you go back into Q and see if you can find, well, because I know we updated that just recently, with the pathways, it wasn't there. And so he said, I don't know what happened, but it was a blurb on somewhere, and I found an old one, we updated, got it posted, but we did that within a few hours. So that's not a problem. We did that.
I think in the reference manual, there's also information similar to definitions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we kind of use that to come up with the definitions that we have to some extent, but it's not the same.
I'll take a look at that. And there's been a lot of talk about building codes lately, especially with electrical inspections and all of that. So, you know, we'll keep an eye on that. Thank you.
Just as a general comment, I think at some point in time, this board is going to need to take a position on artificial intelligence. So when we have that discussion, I don't know what's going to, if it's becoming a issue in other professions. I perceive it's going to become an issue in all of our professions. And so that can just like bring that to everyone's attention. And we're going to need to take a position on that.
It'll be on the floor, they'll all see what we're getting going.
I'm actually turning there. You guys are on top of it. There's a lot of discussion about AI. I mean, it's everywhere. You know, every profession is wrestling with it. Everybody's wrestling with it. And so we're all coming to terms. I mean, I don't think anyone, other than the folks in Silicon Valley, knew that it was going to happen this fast. You know, it seemed like overnight, and it's very advanced. And so there's a lot of discussion. We actually talked about that at our engineer committee meeting. Dr. Ash was somewhat alluding to that, and of course Carter and some of our others as well. So we did reach out to, I know Florida, I don't see it in front of me right here. I believe it was in here. I did give an update to the engineers as it pertains to that. But Florida and North Carolina was the ones that sort of wrapping their minds around it because they TDOT or SDOT, you know, was sort of driving it there in Florida. But
Were they talking? I thought they were talking about 3D drawings.
yeah, that's we there. Oh, thank you. We were. You're right. It was 3D modeling, but we brought up the discussion of AI as well because I was on the phone already with talking to the director out of there, and they're having because we started with 3D drawings and to your point, it flowed into that conversation and developed. So thank you for helping make the bridge. But they said that there's just, it's moving so fast that even though with the 3D models, that's a separate conversation, but they did feel like there was enough information for them to really start digging into making rules or statute for that. And then that also applies to AI. They said they felt like it was just, they haven't had any robust discussions about that yet. So
Plus, I think wasn't part of the conversation that it was accelerating so fast and it takes so long to get stuff passed in the legislature that by the time it became law, it'd be obsolete.
So the 3D modeling was just a small thing because the technological advances there, but then take that on steroids with AI. You know, she's saying if we can't do it with the 3D, like we're struggling with that AI, it's like we don't even, you know, we're just holding on. You know, so at this point we're gonna have to keep watching that. And NCWS, that's what the conferences help out. You know, they're all going to be talking about it. I don't think they can avoid it. I don't think they can sidestep it. So that'll be helpful too to take and glean from that and bring that back to our board, the best practices. But I think right now I was actually somewhat comforted to talk to my counterpart in Florida there because they're sort of on the cutting edge, and even they were like, that's too fast for us. You know, so they're still sort of groping, and they're more of course sort of forward thinking, and even they're saying, with a lot of unintended consequences. You know, you go thinking you're doing one thing, and then you end up opening a bunch of more of the stuff, and you know, that's another reason why there's always that caution with new rules and new statute. You know, you have in your mind, you know, it's just like when you're having a conversation with somebody. You have in your mind, you think you're saying this, but then you get a reaction thinking they didn't hear that. You know, same kind of thing with this development. I think no one wants to be the first one in. You know, no one wants to be the first one in the pool on this one. So we're just until we get more information, we just have to track it. But that's a great point. We'll all be watching that.
One more thing, we thank you, Stuart, for this review, but we're also reviewed by the legislature, I believe, once every sunshine review by the legislature once every so many years. Are we coming up maybe next year or the following year? I was chair when we went through the last time.
Depends if they gave you 5 or 6.
Six, I believe.
I think I'm 6.
Yeah. So we're a couple years out.
So that'll be Rob Barrett's baby to rock on it. Yeah. They usually like the chairs to go up there. So anyway, he may be ill.
Yeah.
Vice chair, right? Yeah. That's how that works. Yeah. Well, all that experience, you know. I hope not leverage that. Any new business? Any other items?
Any more new business? So, there being no further business to come before this board, the meeting is adjourned.
All right. Thank you.
Well done, Madam Chair.
Yeah, well done. Thank you.